Okay, and we're back. We'll just continue where we left off. So let's go to question 3 and take this back to our whiteboard. Mm, okay. So yeah, um, show the difference between a movement along. Okay, so they're talking about a movement and a shift in the PPC, production possibility curve, and explain what might cause each to occur. So give a reason why there's a movement, why there's a shift, and use diagrams, not a diagram, but diagrams to support your answer. So obviously, generally in AS Econ, where you can draw a diagram and you think it's relevant, go ahead. Don't hold back. Definitely go ahead. um like, and a lot of it, something that I like to do, if I'm not too sure whether or not I'll have time, I just leave a few lines, a little space, and just continue my answer. If I have time, I return and draw a diagram. If I don't have time, I don't. I don't think the examiner cuts marks just because you left a few lines in the middle. It's fine. So yeah, but when it says you have to draw diagrams, then there's no good debate or question at all. Just have you really do have to in order to score full marks. This is a pretty straightforward question. The only place where you could go wrong is if you really dive right into it and be like, oh, okay, I know this movement ye hota hai, shift ye hota hai. Take a deep breath. Remember the format that we used to follow, and first try to define some stuff. So you define your PPC. What is a PPC? It's like, oh, the production possibility curve is a curve that shows the combination of outputs that the economy could produce if it is uh, productively efficient. But basically, if it makes use of all resources available to it. So, and then you just draw the basic diagram. I don't think there is other stuff that really helps in this particular case. But do try to draw the basic diagram. Again, this won't be the diagram that the diagram that they're talking about. That really helps make your point. If you have good A here, good B here, we really haven't gone to the actual question. We're just taking out some time to get those initial marks for understanding. Just talk about how points on PPC are efficient points. Your points inside the PPC are inefficient points where you're wasting resources. Points outside the PPC are unattainable points with the current set of technology and so on. No combination of output, irrespective of how efficient you are, can get you your unattainable points. So just talk a bit about that type of stuff, right? Um, and yeah, you should be good. I don't think there's other stuff you can explain here, like you can like define your stuff. So once you're done with this, just dive right into the question. Mm, so first, just take a move, take a have a paragraph and a diagram about a movement along and a shift in. So you take a movement. First, explain what it is. It's basically change in the combination of output that the economy is producing. And before you get to the diagram, you might as well write it here. Explain what might cause a change to occur. So, well, it really depends which type of economic system you're operating in. Like it in a more planned economy, it could be government redirection redirection of resources, for example. So, or it could, in a more of a market economy, be just changes in preference, from the market, the so using the market showing changes in preference that can be basically be shown through demand conditions. um, should should be more than enough to explain why there's a particular change, but do definitely explain well what that change, what that movement means, and then you draw your diagram. Should be nice and simple. Just take whatever good y, good x, or just take two examples of goods. Doesn't really matter. Um, your a movement along. So let's just take a perfectly efficient point, just change it to this particular point. That's your movement along. If you want, you could even draw, like, stretch it out to your, x to your, to the x's. So like here you had, let's say, y amount of good y, and now you just have y1 amount of good y, and you have x1 amount of good y, good x. And although initially you just had x amount of good x, so now you have x1 amount. So you don't really need to go into the depth of it. This is should be more than enough. Because what you've basically done, you used a diagram, hopefully a better one than mine, which you've shown a movement. You've explained what it means by what a movement means, and you've just given a few reasons why a movement might occur. So if we now go towards a shift, so explain what a shift means. You can basically, you can consume, or at least produce, my bad, you can produce more of both goods, uh, at all, at corresponding um, combinations. Well, the idea, what I'm trying to say is that if you shift your curve, so at the corresponding point on the new PTC, assuming I'm talking about a shift outwards that increases, your base, what basically happens, you can produce more of good x and y at that corresponding point. And I'll show this through a diagram. You might want to talk how an outward shift, needs an increase in the productive potential of an economy, means it can produce more with the given set of technology, etc. It can produce more, and an inward shift. That shows the decrease in the productive potential. Right, and just go ahead with the diagram. A very common diagram is to talk about, is to have, let's just type this, in fact, is to have consumer goods on one axis and capital goods on the other. And in this particular diagram, you could combine both. You could show a movement and a shift. I'll just show a movement. So I'll just show a shift just to not be confusing. But what you could do, you could show how if the economy moves towards a combination of more capital goods, that leads to a shift. In case you're feeling lazy and don't want to draw too many diagrams, you can combine that. However, I'll just show an outward shift. And if you just take 2 points, to show how at the corresponding point you can have more production potentially of consumer and capital goods at, let's say, point A1 rather than point A. So the only thing missing in this answer for the shift is what might cause this to happen. So I'll just write about the outward shift. Technology might increase, and understand one thing. So there's a slight difference between the using capital and increasing technology. Technology, just like this is the difference between becoming more efficient, employing more like having more machines, for example, becoming more efficient and moving towards your PPC, and having technological changes which change the way we produce as a whole, which shift your PPC completely. So your outward shift, tech increases, technology increases, so technological advancements, so extraction of natural resources. You found more of them. So net immigration, because despite what type of people you get, if you have net immigration, that is inward migration, definitely the labor force should increase. And since that is a factor of production, you can potentially produce a lot more. You might not actually be doing so because you might not be making full use of them. You maybe have unemployment of resources due to a variety of reasons, but that will definitely at least shift your PPC, which shows your potential. Okay. Um. Yeah, and like if you want, you could write about invert, basically the opposite of this, stuff like wars and all as well. And that really should be enough for this particular answer. It's quite a straightforward one. So let's save this. Let's go on to the next. It's part B. What do we have here? Okay, so let's take this back to our whiteboard. Okay, so discuss the way in which resources are allocated. Okay, so we're talking about the allocation of resources allocated in planned economies, and I guess the other one is and free market economies. Very boring question, to be honest. Consider which type of economic system is likely to have more beneficial outcome. To be honest, I'm not going to fully do this one because it's just a lot of like lot of Ratta type stuff. Like just look at stuff from your notes. There's not a lot of stuff I can explain in this. So, but just to explain what will be looking at. So for 4 marks, you're going to talk about um, planned and how resources are allocated there. And for 4 marks, you're going to talk about free market. And understand, don't just talk about the advantages and disadvantages of planned and free market. The first like 1 or 2 marks would be about explaining how resources are allocated. So if we take the market economic system here, so first explain how resources are allocated, and with the market economic system, you just have to mention the price mechanism. The price mechanism is what ensures that markets clear. The price mechanism is what ensures that changes in demand supply conditions use the price mechanism to derive the equilibrium point, and hence resources are allocated. So here you also mentioned demand and supply conditions. And if you want, you could draw a diagram here showing, for example, a simple price and quantity diagram, how just for one particular product, if either the demand or the supply conditions change, how the market's invisible hand, using the price mechanism, brings it back to equilibrium and decides how resources are going to be allocated. So if demand increases, right, this was your initial equilibrium, quantity and price. So if um, demand increases, so the way things go about, your price initially doesn't change. Your so understand that this is the new demand curve. At the same price, you look at, let me use a different color for this. At the same price, you look at the new demand curve and understand that this is the quantity that consumers are demanding, and this now becomes a quantity that producers are willing to supply because it's intersecting the supply curve. Forget about the old demand curve, that's gone. Just look at the new demand and supply curves. So clearly this is a position of shortage because there's more quantity demanded than what producers are willing to supply. When in order to correct that, the price mechanisms and the rationing mechanism of price that takes place, which is different from the queuing and ration lena wali cheese, that is completely different. What happens there is there's an upward pressure on price, and as price increases, as per the law of demand, the quantity demanded decreases, and as price increases, as per the law of supply, the quantity supplied increases, leading to your new particular price and new equilibrium quantity, which shows how resources are allocated to derive a particular quantity. This is your new equilibrium. Um, so that is, you could use this diagram to show how they're allocated, and then just have one or two advantages of you have a lot on your notes. So advantages, how markets clear, which basically means that there are no shortages, no surpluses. Disadvantages, disadvantages, just any form of market failure, to be honest. So there could be monopolization of markets, lack of public goods, overproduction of demerit goods because of lack of proper knowledge about their harms, underproduction or under allocation of merit goods. You could just write so much, and you should be good for 4 marks for your market system. Again, I just like put down points. Obviously, you would explain it more, and this is just any form of market failure. You get that from your notes, and not really spending too much time on this one. But it's really one that you can do from your notes very easily. Then you write about planned. You'd explain how it's centrally, how in centrally planned so central authorities or the government decide resource allocation based on what they think is best for the economy. When they look at stuff like their macroeconomic goals as well. So in the free market system, it's more of consumer sovereignty, what people want. In plan, it's more of what the central authorities think what people need, and also they look at large scale macroeconomic systems and what's best for that. So you're more likely to have capital goods production in planned, because that might be good for your long run PPC, your long run potential. But in market, you most likely have a lot of consumer goods being produced. So yeah, so you did this, and then you have your advantages, and in which these markets are normally more equitable because the government's responsible. They normally take into account macroeconomic goals, so you're less likely to have inflationary pressures and stuff like that because the government can simply control it. You're more likely to have stuff like full employment and so on. Disadvantages, there may be inefficient surpluses and shortages. So markets, well, there's no market, but like, yeah, surpluses and shortages. There's just a lot of stuff you can write. Like I'm just noting down a few things that you could potentially write about, and then you go towards your conclusion. And like this is literally the easiest conclusion to write, like because for a fact that in market and plan you have to conclude with reference to the mixed economy. So your conclusion would be about, there are like in this globalized world, there are harms. Well, so not a globalized word. What am I writing? My bad. So zoned out a bit over there, but just talk about how there are harms of planned, harms of mixed, not mixed, but mixed, and but both have benefits. And then you will say how economic systems aren't binary; they are on a spectrum where there are various mixes. ऐसे spell करते हैं ना, mixes of the two, of planned and market. So, and what you're saying is that the type of economic system likely to have the more beneficial outcome. You don't necessarily need to pick between these two because they have different benefits, different like shortcomings. Most likely, your market's economic system might be more preferable in the short run. Your planned one might be more beneficial in the long run, because in the long run, then stuff like macroeconomic goals and all of that type of stuff starts to really hit you much harder. So that type of stuff. But the main crux of the conclusion will be looking at economic systems on a spectrum, and how you could have mixes of the two, like either a market mix or a planned mix, and how that you know combines benefits of both systems while minimizing the negatives, the disadvantages, basically. And obviously, I'm talking about your mixed economic system. And you should be good with this. Just to be on the safe side, let's just look at the marketing. Let's just glance at the marketing scheme for this. So, where is it? Yeah, it's right here. So for analysis that explains how resources are allocated in centrally planned economies, including strengths and weaknesses of the system, 4 marks. That's what we did. Then you do the same for free market. And for the evaluation, which type of economy would have more benefit, this must make use of the analysis that is offered. There must be conclusion for 4 marks. So and here is where you get some content. It's a pretty poor marking scheme. In A2, it gets even worse. But so in centrally planned economy, the price mechanism does not exist. Central and regional planning committees allocate resources. In free market, resources are allocated the market mechanism with very limited role for the government. The weaknesses of each system often lead to the conclusion that the mixed economy is the most beneficial, and that's pretty much what we wrote as well. And that would be it for this particular question and for this particular video as well.